Hi there, my name's Jill Tiny. I'm from Collaboration Global, and this is our podcast, Being Human, Hidden Depths. I'm going to be interviewing some of our members from Collaboration Global, and they're going to be sharing with you their extraordinary lives. Although they would probably believe they're just normal, everyday, average humans, but they are extraordinary. A bit like you and me. We all have our story to tell. We've all been through difficult times, and we've come out the other end having learned an extraordinary amount about ourselves that we can share with others. So I think you'll find lots of things that will resonate with where you've been in your journey as well. I look forward to seeing you on the other side. Hello and welcome to Being Human Hidden Depths, a podcast by Collaboration Global. And my name is Jill Tiny, and I have the privilege of being able to interview and have fantastic conversations with many of our members. And one of our members is with us today, and I am desperate to pull apart all that's going on in your brain, Larry, because one of my ex-business partners would always talk about the Matrix, and I know that's part of your thing as well. So welcome to the podcast, Larry Kaul.
Thanks, Jill. Appreciate it.
Lovely to have you here. People can tell from your accent and from my accent that we're on different sides of the pond. Where do you hail from?
So I'm in the Chicago area. I'm in a community called Evanston, Skokie, which is north of the city on the lake.
Wow. How lucky are you by the lake? My son-in-law has just run the the Chicago Marathon.
Oh,
and he said, both of them, when they came back, said, I think Chicago is my new favorite city, over and above New York. So it's like, oh, check that out. So I'm going to have to come visit you soon just to see.
absolutely.
Right. So one of the things I do is I steal a question from Simon Sinek, and he asks on his podcast, his guests, what's one of your happiest memories when you were a child?
I think God, that's such a tough question.
It's the first one that comes to mind.
Yeah,
Out.
I'll give a weird answer,
Oh,
which was trusting myself and recognizing a lot of what I was being taught was really not for me.
Wow. And how old were you around about that time?
I think it started about 5.
Really?
Yes, but it really wasn't until the last few years that I embraced that 100%. So if I can connect the dots looking backwards now in my life,
Yeah.
and I didn't used to be able to, and now I can. So I look back and I see that as a major theme for me, which is the recognition that the subjective experience is true for me, and what I see in the culture and out in the world is just not for me.
Do you know what? You've triggered a memory for me now. I remember being at school and gazing out the window and watching the rain fall down on the window pane and working out which raindrop was going to, beat the other raindrop. And was pulled out of my reverie by the teacher going, come on, you're supposed to be doing this.
Right.
Like, oh.
Don't care.
I didn't care, but also I'm like, I've just got to get through this until my real life starts. This is just something I've got to put up with until I can really get going. So I was definitely in infant school, so maybe 5, 6, same sort of thing. It's
Yes.
interesting, isn't it? And I'd never.
You said something really important, which is I'm going to get through this until my real life starts. And I think that's what I did. Was I didn't let my real life start until later. And that's really been this latest iteration. And I look at all of these experiences that I've had as an entrepreneur and as someone who's done just a ridiculous amount of inner development, and the intersection of those two things, it really was a lot of that process was that it was not trusting what I knew and waiting for the moment to come.
And did you find, so this was my experience, is that by the time the moment had come when you're released to do something special, I'd been conditioned so much that I kind of stopped doing what I wanted to do and did what I felt other people wanted me to do. And I think maybe you've come to that point now in your life where it's like, right, okay, get off with the shackles. I'm going to do what I want to do now. And I'm in that
Yes.
space now, but I just wish I'd done it sooner. I wish I hadn't been conditioned into keeping people happy. Can't upset my mum and dad, but I need to get a proper job. I need to have an income. I need to need, should, ought to, and all of those kind of things. Did you find yourself in that space for a little while?
I think that I let that go fairly quickly because there are moments I've created three successful businesses, and I've entered many new markets from scratch and been successful doing that as well. So I've had a lot of success in my life. And in doing that, there's a recognition now that if it had gotten too successful, I wouldn't have gotten here. So I'm glad. I have a quote that I put together where I'm saying I'm glad the money wasn't in the bank account with the business that I was working on for a long time. And it actually worked, but other people could look at that and say, well, that didn't work. But it's because they don't really understand what was going on.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, that is interesting. How different people view what we're about and what we are up to. So let's go back a little bit. What were you fascinated by in school? What was the thing that caught your attention and you kind of really, when I grow up, I'm going to do ABC?
Uh, I think it was always been about getting to the truth of what was going on around me. And that leads towards naturally careers that tend towards like journalism, writing. Being an entrepreneur was not part of it at all. I didn't, even though I grew up in a family where no one had ever collected a paycheck, it was not. Now I see that as part of that.
Yeah.
But I was always fascinated by people who existed kind of outside the societal norms. Artists, musicians, comedians, the truth teller types, George Carlin, people like, I've always been attracted to that kind of a thing.
So what was your first experience into the world of work? Did you go and get a paycheck or did you follow the family and start your first business?
So when I was younger, I raised myself. So this is typical in the United States. This is like the latchkey kid generation.
Yeah.
So a lot of us did this. So all the stories are coming back now of, walking back home from my job as a dishwasher and a busboy in the steakhouse. And I know I'm 15 years old because I don't have a car. It's 11 o'clock at night and I'm walking home from my job. And that was what I wanted. That's what I did. So because of that, I ended up not being particularly employable, but I was smart enough to be able to, at that time, you could get into like the university system if you could pay the tuition, really.
Yeah.
So my parents had enough money to help me do that. So I was able to get into first a junior college, then a state school, and then a 4-year university. And I moved away to DC. And that kind of led towards kind of entering, I would call it sort of a fancy world, because a lot of people in DC, they're going to these kids, they're going to embassy parties, they're wearing suits. It was a very sophisticated crowd, and I adopted that and more of an international kind of lifestyle. My roommate was from Paris, and I embraced that fully, but I didn't have the skills to go get a regular job or the ability to take the kinds of tests necessary to become an attorney or an economist or something that I saw them all doing, or moving to New York and becoming an investment banker. That was the big thing at the time. So I was chasing all that stuff. And what happened instead is I came back to Chicago and I worked for my family's, they had a little distribution business. So I actually worked for my dad, my mom, and my grandmother.
Oh,
And I took that business from 2 million to 6 million in sales in a few years.
wow.
We got a percentage of that in commission, just doing it. Like I didn't even think about it. And
It-
now I look back, I get how I did it. I understand it, but it was all about freedom because I didn't want to work.
right.
I wanted to do what I wanted, which was travel.
So did you see that as a stopgap working in the family business in order to?
No, I see that as the destiny. It was the beginning of the destiny of learning these skills
Yeah.
that now I have mastered as an expert in being an entrepreneur. It was the first phase of developing those skills.
Do you think that it was like reading and writing, something that was done by rote, that you were taught, you do this, then you do this, then you do this? Or do you think there was an innate ability within you that you're like, yeah, obviously I could do that. That's a piece of cake. Was it something that was inherent in you, or did you gather the information and just regurgitate?
I created it from my imagination. There was no information or learning anything or understanding anything even. All
Mm,
I knew was I was angry that the leading company in the industry service entrance was at our front door and they kept throwing the garbage out in front of our front door. And I hated these people. And they were significantly more successful than we were. And that felt intolerable to me. I was like, I have to beat them. I have to figure out how to succeed with this business. So that was one thing. The second thing is I just wanted to go to France and Spain, and I was involved with a lot of people in my life, where we could go away for 3 or 4 weeks, and I kind of constructed the business in a way where I could take a month off, or a month and a half off, and that was my imagination for that business. That's what I wanted to create and what motivated me.
and when you saw it all coming to fruition, was that a kind of, yeah, of course, that's what's going to happen. Did you ever have a doubt that you'd be able to create that lifestyle that you were after?
No, no, I just what I've learned is that it wasn't what I'm really here to do and what I really wanted.
Mm,
It was what I was able to do, and I figured out how. And
mm,
those skills are very valuable. So
mm,
I'm glad I learned how, but I think there's a deeper kind of inner work connection that I made later that allows me to know who and what I am and what I'm here to do, as opposed to what I can do.
yes.
And I didn't have that yet.
So what do you believe now that you're here to do? What's the
Well, I
message?
think there's three big kind of transformative trends going on. So the first trend is raising awareness. So
Mm,
this is this sort of consciousness expansion that's going on in the world. I think that's trend one. Trend two is about the end of the marketing era for me. So this is about we're done with. So people say, well, my definition of marketing is different. I'm like, no, we have a dictionary, and the dictionary defines it as to promote and to sell.
yeah.
So marketing is about getting people to do what you want. And I've been in marketing and sales my entire career, and I get it. I know how it works, and I know how it works in the modern era too, because I've been involved in this for the last 4 years now in a different way, meaning the social media stuff and funnels and persuasion principles and all of these things.
Mm,
I think the third trend that's going on is the ability to build a business from the inside out that gives you what you really want.
mm,
So you're not copying anybody. It's completely unique. And I think for me, the intersection of these three trend lines is where I want to play,
mm,
and what I think my strength is. So what I think I'm supposed to do is have an impact there for what I call top 1% entrepreneurs, measured by freedom, satisfaction, and happiness without compromising anything. And I think anybody can do that, but I think not everyone will. And the paradox of it, it's actually easier than the hard way I used to do everything, which was forcing a result all of the time, trying
mm.
to work on myself, work on the business, figure it out. Now it takes more courage to do this, for sure. And not everybody has that. And it also takes a lot of unlearning.
Gosh.
And that process is challenging for people. So I look at Red Pill Pathway and what's coming next, called Change Agent Board, which I'm going to launch in March, as being a way for people to do that, who don't want to be stuck in the, this old world that as I see it, I think this world's going to go away over time. And then it's like AI. It's like, it's been going on I was working in AI in the 2000s.
Yeah.
And in the marketing industry, it's been around forever. It's just now everybody's heard of it. And everybody's talking about it all the time, not even necessarily, I mean, maybe overemphasizing in some ways its importance. It's important, but it's kind of a table stakes sort of thing, right? It's going to disappear under the hood of what everyone's doing pretty soon.
Yeah.
And then we'll just all be using it. I think this stuff I'm talking about is coming too in the same way. And then it'll mainstream.
It's a bit like back in the day, we would talk about new technology. And I was at a coaching call once, and there was about a dozen people in the room, group coaching. And the guy said, the coach was like, okay, hands up if you've got a technology company. And one guy put his hand up because he was the IT dude.
Yeah, and we all do.
Yeah, you've all got
right.
technology companies. Get over it. This isn't new technology anymore. It's technology, and get on with it. And I think it's the same with AI. It's going to become part and parcel of everything we do. And I think what's the scary stuff is the unknown that we haven't been privy to, that's been going on behind the scenes, where people have been testing out whether you can have carers that are robots, or people that can machines that can replace people in a way and have a conversation with them, and it can learn from you to carry on the conversation, so people don't have to be lonely, and all of these weird things that we're like, oh, hang on a minute. Or it can impersonate someone's voice, or it can impersonate someone on a video. All of these weird and wonderful things, everyone's a little bit like, oh, I'm not sure about that. But the other stuff, the day-to-day stuff, it's going to be a revolution. And I think you're right. I think there's that 1% of people that are up to something and want to find out any which way they can. Why would you want to force yourself to be able to access this business that you want to create? And there are 99% of people like, no, I'm good. That's okay. It's not for me. And they are happy doing the 9 to 5. There's my paycheck, or this is my business. I earn this much. It works for me. I'm good. I can go home to my family, and I'm not stressed, and that's all I want. And they're happy to be content. And I remember as a kid asking the why question a gazillion times, and my mum said, why can you not just be content?
Yeah.
And I was like, why?
Yeah.
So, because she was. But that's a different generation. But she had been taught, there's no bombs dropping on your head. You have a roof and a house to live in. What else do you want? Stop moaning, child. Get over. Yes, you're bored. That's a good thing. How lovely. And I think now we've flipped it on its head, where we're stuck to our phones with social media, and you scroll and you scroll and you scroll, and you realize that you're looking at nothing. You're looking
Nothing.
at drivel, and it's just noise in your head. Where what you're talking about, and what you've demonstrated to me in the conversations that we've had and the meetings that you hold, what I love about the meetings that you hold, people are looking at things in one way, conventional, and then you open the little door at the end of that corridor and go, but what about all this? There's all this that we can think about as well. So how did you find out about the law of attraction, or the way you view your life, or the way you are teaching people now? Where was the first seed planted for you to make you go, oh, there's more to this than meets the eye?
Well, Niels Bohr, the Nobel Prize winning physicist, has a line about an expert is someone who's failed at everything in a specified domain of human activity, and that's me. So I've done inner development work at the highest level, in entrepreneurial experiences at the highest level, not the funded kind. So the kind where nobody gives you money, which is more pure in a way. My whole life. And the big moment for me was September 20th of 2020 at 5 o'clock in the morning, where I had a quantum leap. So I divide it now into 3 phases. I call it the entrepreneur experience chart. And the first phase is called winning, which is you're looking for a victory over yourself. This is the working on yourself phase. and the working on your business phase. So you're building those skills, and it's about mastery of struggle, effort, and challenge. And I spent my whole life doing that, and then it stopped working.
No.
So September 19th, I had this collapse moment, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't do it like this anymore, but I don't know what else to do. And, I was watching The Matrix, and at the beginning of The Matrix, Keanu Reeves, Mr. Johnson, Neo character, is looking at his green screen on his computer, and it says something like, wake up. It happened to me. So at 5 a.m., there was a get up. It's time to do something different. And this imagination, creative process began. And that really completed on September 20th of this year. So it was, I call it the entrepreneur experiment. So it was 3 years of really doing everything in entrepreneurship and in inner development, just to see what it is, what works, what doesn't work.
What sort of things, tell us some stories, what sort of things have you experimented with?
I think that the subconscious work is a preparation work. This was one of the biggest findings. So if you go back, therapy. So I did therapy many years ago. I did 12-step work. So that's AA from 17 to 24. And that's a very specific program of things you do. Now, I'm not an alcoholic, but I got put there because they thought there was something wrong with me when I was a teenager. So I got put there. So I grew up with AA. All my friends were from AA, 17 to 24, which is a great experience now looking back, So I had a very unusual kind of teenage college experience because of that. So I learned a lot from that. That is preparation work to me. And then I did therapy later, preparation work. And then I did what's called shadow work. So this is subconscious work, bioenergetic work. This opens up space inside yourself to release emotionally bound thoughts and feelings. What's underneath that is self. So connection to self was really what I was doing without knowing that's what I was doing. And I started using a lot of modalities. And then I noticed there's a division between what I'm calling gurus and sages, which is what I talk about in my program on Friday at LinkedIn Live. And there's no such thing as a sage. That's the difference. The sages doesn't exist. It's someone who has been able to create an opening for a creative process to exist. And that's an artist, but we're entrepreneurs, we're artists or scientists. It's the same thing, really. It's the same creative process. That is freedom from the matrix, really, of believing what everyone believes and being stuck in your body all the time, working on yourself and releasing these things. You need to do that, like, for sure, but there's another part of it that's more important and has a bigger impact, which is what I started to get into really in the last year and a half. And that's where the big impact has come, was from being ready to do that work. The guru, to me, is someone who's figured out something that works for themselves, but they're not an expert in what they're in. And then they're teaching other people how to do it like they did it. So I see this a lot with the manifestation people on YouTube, where they know how to do that, but they don't really understand what they're doing and why it won't work for other people. But also they're manifesting things they don't want, like I did. I created 2 successful businesses from my imagination that I didn't want without realizing I was doing that. But it was what I aimed after. I got what I went after.
Yeah. It's like, be careful what you wish for, isn't it? You never know if it's going to come true.
Yeah.
Is it what you wished for? That's interesting, isn't it? That you were learning how to manifest, but it was the wrong. This comes back to the book I talk about again and again, is The Surrender Experiment by Michael
Oh,
Singer.
yeah, that's terrific. But so that's so important, because the wisdom traditions, for me, replaced everything else. I don't pay any attention to anything else anymore. If I find a book or an idea or a guru that did it outside of from their kind of cognating mind, or even if they did it from their self, their deeper self, but they're not an expert in it because they didn't go deep enough, they have no context, and they have no opening to receive this wisdom, I just ignore it. And I teach this to people too, as you build mental models through Michael Singer, Byron Katie, Deepak Chopra. I'm in that tradition, Napoleon Hill, Jim Rohn, all of those people. But then at the same time, all the mysticism traditions, Buddhism, Taoism, the Hindu, yogic approaches, same thing. It's all the same stuff, really. It's just different versions of it. So I think finding the truth systems means a lot because they're inevitably going to work. And the person who did it like Willie Nelson would write a song. So he didn't sit down and say, so what kind of song do I want to work on today? No, he had it as an imagination. He came from an open space, and the songs kind of, he had to work it.
Yeah.
He had to become an expert musician. He had to master the techniques.
Yeah.
Ernest Hemingway didn't just write all this stuff. He sat down and he learned how to discipline his mind and get the right awareness. And he had to think about, what do I want to say? And what experience do I want to share? So he had a role in it, but he didn't make that stuff up out of his own mind.
That's what Elizabeth Thingamy, Eat, Pray, Love, can't remember her name.
Elizabeth Gilbert.
Thank you. She's got a great TED talk, hasn't she, where she tells you how she was struggling after Eat, Pray, Love, where everyone was like, oh, aren't you worried that your next book won't be as successful as the first one? And she's like, well, now I am. I need to cross my mind. She said, but at the end of the day, what she did is she showed up for her genius. She was there, sat at her desk at 9 a.m. every morning. It's like, hey, universe, I'm ready on my team, ready when you are. Just feed me what I need. And the second book came out. I can't remember what it was called now, but that was just as successful, if not more successful. And it is kind of like knowing that you're a channel for these things that can come. And I think that's why I like the surrender experiment, is because it takes the pressure off.
It does, doesn't it?
That kind of what you were talking about in the beginning, where it's like you've got this mental idea, this cognition of like, I should be doing this, I need to do that, I've got to get that done, that sorted, then I'll be successful, then I can be happy. Whoa. Surrender is like, take the brakes off, just sit and be. And there's that great quote doing the rounds. It's like, if you're really busy in your business, you should meditate for an hour a day. And if you're really busy and stressed, meditate for 2 hours. It's that time of like, you get more, you can accept more into your soul and into your being if you just give yourself that space. And then the answer, the solution, the next steps become pretty clear. I mean, that's how I experience it. I'm sure everyone finds it in different ways, but for me, it's that taking that breath and stopping and pausing and waiting. And it's always in this ear. I don't know, I hear this kind of voice. Okay, I'm probably going crazy, but I hear something that gives me a word, and that word is totally not what I was expecting. And it's almost like, really? I did what? Okay, that's the word. Now let me think about that word for a bit. Yeah, that makes okay. Yeah, that's good. I'll listen and rest in that for a while, and then take that on board. And then life can go in a different direction. But I think I do resonate with what you were saying, because like you, we've had several businesses, some that have failed, some that have, died a little death all on their own, and some that have been quite successful. And in the early days, maybe it's an age thing. You do push. It's going to be a success if it kills me. And it possibly could. And then you kind of take your foot off the brake and go, but I don't really want this. Do I want this? I don't think. Why did I do this? And all of a sudden you realize you're stuck in something that you just want to extricate yourself from because it doesn't feel right.
I think that phase of what I'm calling thriving, which is opportunity, enjoyment, and meaning, is when, for me, there was a feeling of something talking to me. There was a feeling of something outside of myself guiding me. And that went away. on February 15th of this year, where that wasn't the case anymore, where, like Michael Singer says in the surrender experiment, he had a recognition of that voice is me. So there's an inner experience of knowingness, of what I would call fluidity. So that's existing in the moment of now. And then the next phase, the next step after that, in this phase of impact, I call it impact after thriving, you move from thriving to impact, is fulfillment, where there's a feeling of everything is inside and there is no outside to be concerned about. So there is no outside at all in your experience. You just don't even pay attention to it, but you know it's there. Obviously, we're living in this world. So we have to and want to succeed in this world and find our place in it. But there's a fulfillment experience around it. And then the next stage after that is what I call connection. And this is the best stage, where there's a access to expanded, expansive wisdom all the time. And it's almost impossible to keep up with it. And I think that is a real acceleration moment. In my Summit Club group, what's great about the Summit Club group is I have a bunch of other people who are in the same stage, and I never could have found these people. They just showed up. But it's a real peer group in that sense. And that allows us to do a mastermind format based on what Napoleon Hill did. And the two components of the mastermind format, I've never seen it done myself. I've been in them and I've heard of them, and I look carefully and I'm like, that's not really what he meant. So they're not really, they're confusing working on something or group coaching or even learning something with a group of people with a shared common burning desire of inevitable success bonding together, and the mysterious, essential, energetic power that is released by people like that, creating a third mind. And he said it is the only way to really fully express that impact in the world. And he's right. I've noticed, because I'm watching us accelerating like this without doing anything except creating that condition in that room and not allowing any breaks to come in. And I think this is what he did to be successful. And then connecting into that intelligent wisdom all of the time. I think he did that as well. And he talks about that in the book too. And it gets glossed over. It gets glossed over a lot.
I must admit, I have the book, but I haven't read it because the print is incredibly small. But I know of it, and of some of the content is famous in its time. Do you think there are connections and acceptance of other sources, such as Abraham Hicks, or the group of people that set up with the Secret, and then obviously the backlash to the Secret? Are these all people coming from the same page, so to speak, or is this just you've got to find your own space and occupy it?
So I started doing that in pretty much November of 2022. And some people will call it automatic writing. And that is a collective. So you connect into an energetic collective, but it has an agenda. And it's good. It's good. There's nothing wrong with it. So that energetic collective, I started calling it Bob. And it taught me a lot. And a lot of that came from spending a lot of time with law of attraction and doing so I do the things in the book. So I spent a lot of time doing the things, the teachings of Abraham, and they worked. And it opened up that energetic connection. So I was able to receive that sort of channel information, but it's very limited. So the next phase was called the Akashic Records, and I learned from this woman, Linda Howe, how to access the Akashic Records. That is a very different energy. The Akashic Records has a purity to it where you feel like, at least I did, like white light was coming into me. I mean, that was incredible. And that's also very limited because it's still an external experience. It's something coming to you that you are passively allowing into you. Mm-hmm. The phase where things really accelerated for me was when I allowed, over time, that's the energy that I would call that spirit. So I look at it as a triangle. So essence is the bottom, matter is here, and spirit is here. Mm-hmm. That spirit is intelligent. And when you recognize that intelligent spirit is you, it's a different experience completely of that information. And that happened to me on February 15th.
It's amazing that you remember all these dates. It wasn't just
I wrote it all down. I wrote it down, and I've recorded a lot of it because there's so many books in this. I don't want to miss the data. Plus, I see myself as a discoverer, an explorer, and a thinker of this inner development work to master it to the point where I've created and still creating a scalable system so entrepreneurs can all do this themselves within the system. Because what I've transcended, like Niels Bohr talks about, is don't do it like me. So I'm going out and saying, instead of be like Mike, the marketing era, Michael Jordan, be like, I was involved in a little bit of that, actually. I worked for a company that did their national sales meeting, and it was all about, what do we do with Mike on stage? And I saw what they did with Gatorade sales. I saw all this. And then my distribution company, we represented companies like Reebok. So that was the Shaq era, pump you up, and the shoes and just all this stuff. And I went to Reebok's national sales meetings, and it was all about being like the celebrity stars. And we're seeing this again now on Instagram with the influencers. And it's nonsense. And what I'm seeing with me now, and what I want to bring to the world, is don't be like me. It's the opposite. Don't do what I did. Do what you're going to do.
Yeah.
And what I've got is the system, because I've explored every nook and cranny of it. And every time I fail in something, I'm trying to figure out what actually happened. And there's always a lesson in the failure, which isn't a failure at all. It's just, that didn't work, so now I know this. So the next person who comes along won't do it like I did. And then I'm like, well, how will they do it? And as those answers start to come, numbers are important. So you see things in 5s, 7s, 8s, 12s. When you see that, you know you're in a wisdom tradition, because it's designed in parts for multiple individuals to use, as opposed to, here's the way I did it, do it like me.
Yeah.
That's not a wisdom tradition. That's a dangerous trap for an entrepreneur, where I've spent $150,000 at least over 4 years on what I call guru programs. And there's nothing wrong with learning how to do things at all. There's nothing wrong with it. Someone's really good at presentations or social media or mindset work or whatever. There may be a moment where you need that. Just don't buy it from fear. Right? Don't go with them from lack of something. Go to them because you're saying, I want the sharper tool set from you.
Yes.
And that did work for me, but typically it wasn't bought that way by me. And then I wondered, like, why isn't this working for me? It never worked, not one time.
Yeah. It's the difference, the power between the positive energy and the negative energy. As you say, if you're coming to something from fear, then you're just restricting yourself. But if you're coming to something from openness and receiving, then it's got that possibility. I was on a call the other night. In fact, it was last night. I'm just trying to see where I put my notes with Lisa Nichols, there we go, and Marcia Shimoff talking about it was called the Miracle Zone. And the three things they said, which is quite interesting. Here we go. Move from the ego zone to the giving zone. Supercharge your own intentions and desires by harnessing the power of the thoughts of those around you, which is what you were saying about having that special group of people that kind of
Yes.
magnified the intention. And know your own inherent worthiness in order for you to be open to receive the miracles. And I think just those stepping stones give anyone pause for thoughts. Like, so how do you receive a compliment? Are you thinking negative thoughts? Who are the people around you? And you're like, oh yeah, oh, okay. I remember being told many years ago about avoiding negative people, and it's like, well, I don't see my mother that often, but what can you do? You know, if you're around somebody who's very negative, it's hard. But all I did was, rather than go and spend a day with my mother, we managed to move her closer to us so that we only had to spend 10 or 15 minutes a day rather than go for a whole weekend, which all of a sudden became less onerous and much easier, and the relationship became easier as well. And again,
I think what they're talking about is moving from mind to self,
mm,
and that process is really important. And there's many ways to do it. And the key is finding the way that works for the individual. And because I've tried almost all of them, I can figure out, like, for me, for my type of energetic connection type, this will work and this one won't. And then for other people, they can discover that, for themselves. I think that's important. I heard a guy he's got millions of followers, and he was talking about bliss, and he said, existing in a state of bliss. So we talk about bliss being an experience, and then he said, I will never let anybody steal my bliss, so I won't be around negative people. And I'm thinking, well, then you're not really in bliss, because it's conditional still. So you're susceptible to accepting other people's realities. So you haven't gotten there yet.
yeah.
So I think there's a opportunity, and this is Michael Singer talked about this a lot, is being attacked by the FBI for 7 years when all he wanted to do was go and talk to his mastermind council and meditate and stuff, which is what he was doing, was the lesson of honing and perfecting himself through having to deal with these people who didn't know what they were doing and were trying to persecute this hippie guy who didn't care about money in the first place for all these illegal practices. That was a really important point in the book. And because he did it and surrendered to that experience, he had to spend a lot of time with them. Negative people, talk about negative people, they're also trying to destroy him. And he was forced to do that for many years, and it perfected his ability to never live in anyone else's reality. So it's a lesson, I think, sometimes. And I think what I've noticed is it's often not what I think I want. And then I look at it and I say, what is this person supposed to teach me now?
Yeah, that's powerful. Yeah.
And that's harder.
Yeah, yeah. So there is an element of protecting yourself, but at the same time, knowing yourself. And I think when you know yourself, you know what you're capable of and what you're not capable of yet.
Right.
Do you find yourself on a daily basis going through set practices, or do you kind of, I've got it now, so I know what I'm doing, so it's all ad hoc and it just when it feels right? Are you going?
That's a great question. I think you're right. I think there's a matter of knowing where you are, but it
Mhm.
takes context because you have to know how the system works. I just started calling it the entrepreneur reality system because it's incredibly predictable. It's as predictable as the natural processes and laws of gravity, the weather. It's the same. It's incredibly predictable, but it's very intricate, these principles and laws. And as I've learned more and more of them, I realize how they can be used. Now, I learned a lot from Bruce Lee. So Bruce Lee, because I studied martial arts in my 20s, mostly Tai Chi, the internal martial arts, the energetic martial arts. And his martial arts system at Jeet Kune Do was no form. Now, to get to no form, takes years. And the way you get to know form is you do the forms, and then you start seeing the limitation of the forms. And then you say, well, do I need this anymore? And this is what Bruce Lee spent his life doing. And then he loved this because in Asia, you're not supposed to do that because you're attacking the master, and you're supposed to be deferential to the master who's mastered the form. And instead he's showing up and he's saying, we don't need these forms anymore. They didn't like it.
The new kid on the block.
So I have his book right here, the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, and I haven't really delved into it enough yet. I would like to, but I think you want to get to that, and that's called being yourself in flow, and that's the stage of fluidity, which is the first stage of impact, the impact phase.
So is that kind of where you're releasing yourself from the ego, so you can let that go and you don't need that anymore? Or do you see ego as still part and parcel of who you are?
I think what happens is when you're in self and you're not experiencing the world through your senses primarily, you're using your senses and your ego self almost like a character that engages on your behalf to do things you couldn't otherwise do. So it becomes very important. So this is, I think, an error in thinking. I think there's a lot in Buddhism. There's this idea of no self, and I think that's an error in thinking. So or in communication. So what it really means to me is you are recognizing the truth of what self is. So knowing who and what you are, knowing what you are is what's happening there. And what you are is here. So, people want to escape here through these inner development practices and go zoom up in the, astral plane and meditate and like leave their body. I'm like, that's just die. That's something you can use as a technique to better be here, to make an impact in the world through being able to, what I've learned from Course in Miracles. I did the teacher training Course in Miracles the last couple of weeks. And what I learned from it is we're here to learn from the people who need us, not to teach them. It's totally selfish. We're here to learn to perfect ourselves through being here for them, and they show up when you're ready, and only until you're ready. And I thought, oh, I get it. So you can't do that if you're not aware of how ego self is part of you. It is you as well. It's not a fake you. It's just impermanent, transitory, but useful. Yeah,
it's interesting. There are so many different takes on ego, and it's been given a bad rep, I think.
Right. Yeah.
In the past.
Right. It's like saying, it's like saying this is bad. It's a pen. It's going to disappear someday. I'll lose it. I won't need it at some point, but right now I need a pen.
Well, one of the things I love about Collaboration Global is we talk about there is no right or wrong. And when you take that away, all of a sudden you're opening up more possibility. And I liken it, there's so many things in this world that are right or wrong, yes or no, black or white, Tory or Labour, so many different things that is opposed, and it's restrictive, and there's no way back from that space. So when we say there is no right or wrong, okay, because generally all the rules of the game in our life, in our society, in our history have been made up by generally man. So who says they're right? Aristotle, is he around to argue about it now? No. So there are things that we can all agree on, but it doesn't necessarily make it right. Lots of people agreed, let's have a Holocaust. It doesn't make it right.
Yes.
So many things that, so if you take away right or wrong, and let's go, what's best for humanity? What's a good thing that we can do for everybody else? And again, coming back to Collaboration Global, 99.9% of the people in this community are up to some good, doing something that's beyond themselves for other people. And they can detach themselves from the ego that's like, what's in it for me? They can remove that and just go, so how much can I help? And what I love is when you're in that space and you're looking outwards rather than inwards. And we all have to do that inner work. Don't get me wrong, that's a given. We have to start there. But once you're ready to start helping other people, that's where the magic happens, because the money that you worried about, the roof over your head that you worried about, all the other things start coming in your direction, because you are giving of yourself, of the genius that you've been blessed with, in order to help other people. And when I think we've said this before, love on this planet is our superpower, and as humanity, we do not connect enough with that in order for us to connect with other people. And when that power comes together, and when we get a few people in that state that you were talking about, where intentions can be set, then the world is your oyster. There is no problem out there that cannot be solved, especially the man-made ones. We can do so much. It's just bringing people together to make that flip of the consciousness to go, right, this is how it could be or should be for the majority of humanity. And there are always going to be obstacles, and nobody knows the right answer, because there is no right answer, but nobody knows all of the solutions, but together we do.
Yes, that's right. And so I'm working on a book idea after I finish the entrepreneur experience, which I'm releasing chapters of now. And it's going to be titled something like How to Know What's True in a World Where Everyone Has an Opinion. And the truth all comes from the same place, but we've accessing it through our unique blueprint, which is a very intricate entrepreneur reality system mechanism, which I think is often misunderstood, but also critically important. Or you build a kind of company you don't even want to work in, because you don't really know who you are and what you want and what you like to, how. It's not what you like to do, it's who you want to be. So it's that level of understanding of yourself, and being able to live in that and access that is where the truth is. So and that's the consciousness expansion awareness part. It's really being able to get access to that truth. And it triggers people because they're like, well, who are you, holier than thou, to know truth? And the way I respond to that is I trust my own experience, not what you're telling me, because that's your belief. And my values are the beliefs that I've examined and found useful, but they're not the principles and the laws that are working on me. It's accessing through these principles and laws, this truth world. So I think they call it the Dharma realm in Buddhism, that matters. And that matters a lot. And we're all accessing the same stuff. You talk about channeling and all that. We're all accessing. That's where the truth is in that too. It's just, I think it's a limited version of it. So our awareness of it is limited, and it is limited because it's just that collective. It's not all that exists. So what works better is connection into essence, all that exists through self, through being in self outside of mind. That's really where the bigger kind of energetic power is, with the consciousness expansion. And David Hawkins talks about this with, power always overcoming force. So people look, well, how did Gandhi do it? How did Martin Luther King? That's how they did it. They did it through power, and they enlisted other people in their cause because they knew how to communicate effectively. And this is Red Pill Pathway to me. It's the same thing for entrepreneurs.
You know what? You've just hit on something that reminded me. I've been saying for probably 30 or 40 years, there are some people in this world that are born with the power. They don't always know it. Sometimes they realize it, and they will use that power for good or for evil. And I have an innate, I would be in a pub and look around the room and go, he's got it, she's got it, or he hasn't got it. And it's just this innate something about them.
That's truth. They're accessing subjectively truth, and you feel it. And we all have the mechanism that allows us to do this, but a lot of people don't listen to it.
And I've seen it in children, like 3 and 4-year-olds. You can tell.
They know automatically.
Yeah. And I think we've all got, as you say, we've all got the access to it. It's just whether we get out of our own way and choose.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah.
Listen, you've been telling us a lot about the things, the plans that you have for the future and the programs that you've got coming up. If there was an entrepreneur out there that was going, oh, this is fascinating, I love, and wanted to know where to start, where would you, if they didn't have access to you, which we're going to give them access to in a little while, but where would they start on their journey if this is brand new to them and they have no idea where to go searching for information?
Well, I think there's three phases of this, and I look at Dale Carnegie inspired my know, like, and trust modules, and I'm really going with his approach, but intersecting that with the modern approach to learning. And at the know phase, you don't want to talk to me because you just want to know, what is this? So I would go to redpillpathway.com and scroll down to the bottom, and I'm expressing what I know through my experience in those links. So Medium, Quora, Substack, the podcasts, all that is there. And the social media stuff, which is more superficial, is there. That's the no phase. The like phase, you can sign up for the entrepreneur experience and come once without charge. So you can check that out. And then the trust phase would be, there is a scheduled time. But I would say to people, don't schedule time until you've worked through know and like. Otherwise, you're wasting my time and your time.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Know, like, and trust, for sure. Did you know, just by the by, that one of our members in the community, James Knight, has been trained by Dale Carnegie back in the day?
Directly with him?
Organization.
Directly with him?
As far as I know, yes, because
Wow.
he utilizes some of his stuff. I don't know for how long, because obviously it's a long time
He
ago.
was instrumental for me. I spent about 3 years, really, this was many years ago, probably in my 30s, doing the kinds of things very aggressively and consistently that were in the book about how to stop worrying. When I started doing the know, like, and trust module for Red Pill Pathway, like I do with everything, I'm like, who knows how to do this? I built my product module with Steve Jobs ideas. So, because I was like, who knows how to create a product experience? Steve Jobs. And all those ideas start coming from my experience with Steve Jobs. And the same thing with Dale Carnegie, because I spent the 3 years kind of embedded with those ideas. And it's really how to do it. And I think if you look at it, look what people are teaching now on social media, they're teaching manipulations. Essentially, it's how to get people to do what you want, and it's kind manipulation. It's not nefarious or evil. It's this figuring out of what will work all the time. And I find the social media content people are always how to make it work, how to succeed on LinkedIn, how to build a 7-figure business with a 6-figure passive income, all this stuff. I already did that, and I know how to do it. They did it once maybe, but most of them haven't even, but they're talking about how to do it. The people who are following them are people who are copying them, doing what they suggested in social media. So it's like this inner revolving circle. Dale Carnegie would look at all that and say, stop doing all of that. You don't need to do any of that. You need to pay attention to the people around you. Like you said, you need to serve them by learning from them and giving them your energetic gift. And then, like Napoleon Hill said, what is your value exchange? So in return for this success, what are you going to give the world that's useful for the world? It's not that complicated. It's just the opposite of what we're taught to do. So like you said, you have to get out of the way and learn how to use these systems effectively for yourself.
Yeah. I mean, years ago, I heard somebody talk about sales, and they said it as though it was a revelation. When you're closing, you're helping people to solve their problems. And I'm like, surely that's the opening conversation. It's not just the close. And it's like, then that's why they were closing so hard, because that person doesn't realize how much you can help them. So you've really got to tell them that. And it's like, just have a conversation with them. If they don't want to be helped, they don't want to be helped. But you offer, and it's just the difference between filling your targets, and you've got to
Knowing
do
your targets,
like the
yes.
old
So think about the word offer. The word offer is to offer.
yeah,
That's it. Is
yeah,
I'm offering this, and you try to make it understandable for
yeah.
that person given where they are. And that's it.
There are so many things that we are becoming awake to. I think there is, and I've said this before, since the pandemic, people are looking at their lives in a different way. They're looking at their job, their day job or their business it's like, what else is there? Because when you were locked down, everything got taken away from you. The fancy holidays, the
Yeah.
driving around in your fancy car. And what did you miss? You missed your family and your friends, your community. The only stuff that's really tangible is the other human beings around you. So to be able to connect with those people, but again, you can connect more deeply with other people once you know who the hell you are, and you've connected as deeply as you can with yourself. I'm just looking at the time, Larry. I think this is fascinating. You and I could go on all day.
Yeah,
Um,
that's true.
so what is your I'm curious and I'm nosy. Okay, I'm nosy, let's be honest. Jill's nosy. To find out on a daily basis, how do you physically check in with yourself? Or do you slip back into same old, same old? Oops, I've gone down that road again. Are you a totally
Never.
transformed person?
Yeah, no, I never do anymore. There's a permanent inflection point where that ends. And
Mm,
there's a complete emergence into the new state. That's the quantum leap. But
right.
then you have to learn how to be in that state. So for me, it's a daily process of amazement, of recognizing how little I know,
Mm,
of how much there is and how endless this is. And that's the Socrates idea of and Lao Tzu talks about this too, of how, and what they mean, I think, is we can't know anything through our mind. We only know through self. And being in self, we recognize our role is limited and small in the bigger equation. I think that's what they were saying. And my experience of that is to recognize when I slip out of it and then say, oh, whoops, and then get right back into it again.
mm,
And that can happen, certainly, but not that often, not and as much now. And that's because of the mastermind group. So the mastermind group, because we meet weekly, elevates that connection dramatically. And we've all experienced it. Everyone in the group has.
mm,
So there's less, you're either turning it toward or you're turning away. There is nothing else. It's toward it, truth, your truth, or away from it. So there's less turning away from it because the feeling's bizarre. It's sort of like, why am I creating suffering in myself? That makes no sense when I can't do anything about anything anyways, because I
mhm.
already tried all that and none of it worked. So why would I,
Go
why would
back.
I do that? It doesn't make any sense. Now it's easy to do that when you have the support of the group.
Yes. Yeah, I get that. I totally get that. And as Abraham says, you get tuned in and turned on. So you're kind of, your
Yeah.
radar is out there waiting for that
Yes.
connection all the time. Listen, Larry, thank you so much. You've just
Thank you.
opened the door a crack for anybody that's interested in this kind of thing, because we know that you and I know a tiny, tiny atom of what is out there to learn. And it is
Yes.
fascinating to live your life from this space. I just think it's incredible. I've been blessed with people in this community that have offered quantum healing. And, I'm always the person that says, I don't understand this stuff. I'm fascinated by it. And when you look at how you live your life, slowly but surely, you are like a tanker moving direction into another space, and it just becomes easier. Life
Hmm.
becomes calmer. There's less stress. It just feels better. When people say, "Oh, weren't you upset when somebody did this to you?" I'm like, yeah. Oh, I would have taken offense. I said, "Oh, I'm too lazy to take a gate. I really couldn't be bothered. I just don't do that." So it's that kind of, it's a new space to inhabit, and it's just, if only the rest of the world could cotton on much quicker, it would be a lot easier. But I wish you every success with this new developments you're bringing out this year. Redpillpathway.com, is that the right?
Yes.
To go and find out some more. What's the easiest way to connect with you, Larry, if people wanted to get in touch with you directly?
Well, redpillpathway.com. And like I said, you could scroll down to the bottom if you want to just get to know me better and go through those links. I write and record a lot. And if you want to get more connected, then there's different ways, like attend one of our events, or there is a calendar link for people who are ready for a conversation.
And I would thoroughly recommend going to one of those events. It's a fascinating conversation. So yeah, for sure. Thank you so much. And of course, if you want to meet Larry on another Zoom call, Collaboration Global have monthly guest meetings. You can find them through Eventbrite or through collaborationglobal.org. And he's often there as well, so you can have a chat with him at one of those guest meetings. But for now, Larry, until next time, thank you so much. It's been a
Thank you.
joy. See you soon.